everyone. Okay, so episode 8. A lot of stuff happened this episode. A lot of things to discuss. I will get to the big things later on because they happened later on in the episode. So let's just start off with the very beginning. Okay, so we open up the episode pretty much right where we left off with Clary and Clary and Jace, and they're standing very close to each other, holding the cup and having a little conversation in front of everybody. And so it was real. I loved the part as a part of that scene when they're talking and all of a sudden Izzy shows up and she just snatches the cup away from them with her whip. I was like, yes, that was amazing. And then so Izzy walks down the stairs and then they're greeted by Alec, who's just staring at that thing with all the things, the techie stuff. And Alec takes the card from Clary and he puts it in that safety deposit box thing that they have underneath the ground. And there's a little bit of bad blood between Clary and Alec. It seemed like they weren't being so bro-TP-ish. Did you see what I did with the bad blood thing? Yeah, alright. But they were not being as bro-TP as they were before. So a little bit of tension between the two of them. Okay, and so then with all of their tech stuff, and they see something coming to the Institute, and so it's like beeping away and that little red thing is coming. I love all the tech in this this show. Like, it was so cool to have that and for them to be like, hey, somebody's coming. And so they go outside, and another thing that I noticed that I thought was really funny was that Alec and Jace made sure to get their jackets to make sure that they were nice and cozy before they went outside, and Izzy just walked on out. So that was just a little thing that I noticed. Okay, so then we walk outside and it's Raphael. And not only is it Raphael, he's holding a very limp Simon in his arms, and just the emotion of Simon looking not alive was just not fun for me. I mean, okay, Alberto and David, Alberto especially, did such a good job this episode. I was so impressed with his performance. Well, he didn't do anything until the end, but I mean, the end was amazing, and I will get to that later on. But then also David as Raphael was absolutely amazing also. Not only did he look good, but I mean, they still had the super white makeup, which is so much, but he did really well too, and I was very happy with his performance, when they were underground and Raphael and Jace were talking. Oh wait, yeah, that's the next scene. Okay, so then they take Raphael and Simon underneath the Institute to that whatever it was down there, or underneath the Institute, you know. And so, one thing that, the music during that scene was really cool. It really set the mood of, despair, which was on point because mucho despair was happening during that scene. Ooh, and I also really liked, that Raphael, they, took his Catholicism into account, and they made sure to put that in there because, as we all know, or if you've read the books, Raphael was, very Catholic before he was turned. And so, he even, this is one thing that didn't happen in this episode, but I hope that they do maybe in the future when he, talks to Simon again, getting ahead of myself, but, Raphael's, little, his scar on his chest of the cross that he used to wear on him. I kind of want, I mean, he was kind of covered up, but hopefully, we can see that scar, because that's a kind of a cool trait for Raphael's character, was that he's still, religious despite all this, and he has something to show for it. And so, yeah. And then also, he used the word fledgling. They're using all of the book terms, which is just amazing. And Clary was like, that he's dead. And he's like, he's a fledgling. And I was like, yay. And I love the Jace and Raphael banter. That was amazing. What did he say? He's like, you guys in your coffins. What Jace said, he's like, not the sexed up, vampires or whatever, the blood sucking vomit, coffin laying, whatever he said. And Raphael's like, coffin implies wooden box. We have caskets now. They're made of 14 karat gold. And Jace is like, my bad. And that was just, I don't know. I just really liked that interaction. My computer keeps falling. And so, of course, we get the scene with Valentine and Jocelyn, and he's still being super creepy, as per usual. And so that happened. And the next scene was with Robert and the Lightwoods. And so it started off with Robert and Maris, and they're talking. That's another thing that I'm really liking that they're doing in the show too. I mean, they did it in the book, not everything was about Clary, but they're showing scenes that are about other people, not just they're doing this, actual scenes with substance with other characters, and it's just really nice to watch because the Lightwoods are a big deal. It was funny because Izzy and Alec, Jace wasn't there, Izzy and Alec walk in, and I really liked how they filmed that because they walked in and sat down, and then the camera kind of panned out, and it was just the two of them sitting kind of small, and they took up a small part of the screen. And so I really liked that because it was like they're still these, you know, children in this world, and they still have their parents in the Clave and the Institute to, you know, that are above them. So I like that. I don't know if it was symbolism or what, but it was just a nice visual to see them like kind of smaller in this bigger space. Oh, and then this is something I didn't see anybody talk about on Tumblr, because obviously I go on Tumblr like immediately after. But everybody was just talking about the Alec thing, but I'll get to that in a minute because that was very interesting and I liked it very much. But when Maris and Robert, they're like, oh, you wouldn't know anything about that, right? And so Izzy, she actually said nada, and Alec said no, and I'm like, again with the Spanish, or it sounded like nada, right? Because I know in the very beginning that what's his name, Alec, he said et tu, like et tu Brutus, and I heard it as itu, but I'm pretty sure she said nada, so that's just exciting for me because Spanishness. So when the scene like ended, there's just so much pressure on the Lightwoods, on the Lightwoods, yeah, on the entire family. And it's just crazy. I'm loving how much more into the political part of the shadow world that they're going into with the show. Because it's just, that's what this whole thing is about. It's about the Clave and, you know, the Shadowhunters name and the deeds and this. And so I'm really happy that they're including more of the politics within the show because it's just super, super interesting. Okay, and then we come back to that scene under the ground with Clary, and then Simon's just laying there, and Jace is still with her, and Raphael's still there because he's not gonna go outside because it's late, it's daytime. So she's like crying over Simon, and I'm a sympathetic crier. Like if I watch a movie, usually when I'm by myself, but when I watch a movie or a TV show or something and the person on screen starts crying, I will start crying. So when she was crying, I was like, oh God, don't, because then you're just gonna make me, and it's just not gonna be pretty. And so she started crying, and she was like, oh, it's not my fault. And I'm like, oh, it's not your fault, but I mean, you could have been there a little bit more. So I mean, she's not completely to blame, but yeah, that was kind of sad that she was like blaming his death on her. Like what a burden to hold. And now and then she has to make that impossible decision of to kill him or to turn him, and that's a big decision. And I don't remember how exactly that went in the book because I was rereading City of Bones and not City of Ashes, and so I don't remember exactly if she chose to bring him back or if they were just like, hey, meet me at the cemetery, Raphael is gonna bring back Simon. I don't remember how exactly it went. But, yeah, that's later on. I'm getting ahead of myself again. Okay, and then the next scene was the big scene. We got it in a sneak peek last week. And, we have little Max, and this is the only time that we ever got to see Max, in the entire episode is when he was talking to Alec. And then all of a sudden, Valentine comes through the doors. And that was crazy sauce because what are you doing here? Shouldn't be here. You should be in the Ukraine, in Chernobyl. What are you doing here? And so, it's not Valentine, it's Lydia. And so she, or not she, Alec, and when his arrows, like, just unglamored themselves. I love that with Alec's arrows. That's so fun to watch. But, he shoots an arrow at Valentine really fast. And, Lydia, which is Valentine, as a shapeshifter. Because they have the new, I'm going all over the place, but they have the new, the new shape-shifting rune, and so it turns out to be Lydia, and then she grabs the arrow super fast. I was like, whoa, that's cool. And then it's Lydia, and she's like, yeah, that reaction time was abysmal, except for you. And it was a nice, like, interaction because it was just, I liked it. So yeah, I loved that opening scene with Lydia. Lydia Branwell is in the house. That was just a great scene. I love that was a really cool entry for a character to walk into a room and just for a character's entrance into a show. I bit my tongue. Ow. But I really liked it. It was really cool and I enjoyed it. Okay, so one thing that I absolutely found hilarious was, so Lydia walks in. She's very abrasive as, that's how she comes off, like, she says later on in the show. But Maris does not like her. Like, you can just tell. She is a threat to her authority, and Maris is just not digging it. And so there's just some tension already between them two, which is just amazing. And I love that, because then it makes what happens later on so much more sense. And I also really liked her acting. I forgot the actress's name, but I really liked how she was, you know, portraying the character and how she was acting. And it wasn't like just because you know how sometimes in shows you like they're trying to act like really you know, authoritative and intimidating, and it doesn't work, but she was intimidating and it was really cool. Okay, and so the first thing that came to my mind when Lydia was like, oh yeah, that we're taking over or whatever, I just thought of immediately to Harry Potter, where Harry's like, what does that mean? And Hermione's like, the Ministry is taking over Hogwarts. And it reminded me of that, and I don't know. Or no, that's not what Hermione says. She's like, what is that? Oh, it means the Ministry is interfering at Hogwarts. And that's just what I thought of. And then after that, is when we get our first look at the Forsaken. And they look like zombies, which they looked really good. I'm really impressed with the makeup departments because they looked really cool. And so, they attack the Jade Wolf, and I'm just like, Luke, run. Honey, run, get up, they're coming, like, can you leave? And so then they fight and they have it out. And then from there we skip to Simon's house, and this is where Clary is going to tell Simon's mom something. We don't know what she's gonna tell her. I don't know why I totally forgot that Jace was invisible, so when Simon's mom walked in, I'm like, why isn't she like looking at him? I'm like, wait, he's invisible though. Then it was funny because they're like talking to each other in front of Simon's mom, like when Clary was very close to telling his mom something, and so Jace knocked over the Speak No Evil monkey, and I thought that was funny. And then he goes over there and he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, dude, she's right there. Can she not hear you? Oh, and poor Clary, she was trying so hard not to cry. You could just tell on her face. Okay, so then we come back to the Institute, and that's the part where Alec and Izzy are walking, and he's like, oh, jealous much? And she's like, no. Maybe. How does she catch that arrow? I'm like, oh, Izzy, jealous Izzy, that's adorable. And Alec was kind of smiling at Lydia, like, as he was looking at her. I thought that they're just gonna be such bro TP, and I'm so excited for it. But yeah, it was funny because they walked to her, and then Alec gets the message from Luke about the Forsaken and the Jade Wolf. And so he puts it on the big screen, and so they're like, oh yeah, that you're friends with Lucien or something. Oh my god, Lucien! That's what Valentine was saying. In his scene, and it made me think of Underworld. If you've seen that movie with Kate Beckinsale and all those people, I'm like, Lucien. Ha! Okay, but anyways, and so Lydia's like, well, let's go. And it was funny because during one part in that scene, Lydia says something, or she interrupts Maris. Oh, because when she talks about the circle, and Maris like kind of tenses up when she talks about it, and she just gives her like the biggest side eye. I'm like, oh, that's where Alec learned it from. Okay, and then I forgot to mention this. They go back, I don't know if it's a scene after or if it was before. I don't know, something, but they're in Simon's room. Jace and Clary are in Simon's room. Again, with like the religion thing, I'm glad that because these characters are religious, and so I'm glad they're still keeping that a part of Simon's, you know, character, because he's very, you know, family oriented. He's Jewish, as we know, and so Clary made sure to get that. I don't know if it was like a bag, I don't know what that was, with the Star of David on it, and so she made sure to get that, and the camera made sure to get it. And then, okay, and then during that scene, yeah, Jace told the Falcon story, and I didn't completely, but I kind of forgot about that whole story, and so, it was really, I'm really happy, and I'm glad that they, oh god, every time with the trash, I'm really glad that they decided to keep that in there, because it's a very big part of Jace's childhood and of Jace's, like, being, so I'm very glad that they kept that in there. And so, he's, like, telling Clary, and he's, like, tearing up. I'm like, oh, God, his, like, sad face makes me sad. I do not like it. And so she's like, that's an awful story. That was another scene that was making, it made Clary and Jace closer, because now she knows more, and it's just that their relationship is developing beautifully. Alright, so then we're back to Lydia and Alec, and they're both walking through the, those things to the Jade Wolf. And I love the majority of the scenes in this episode were of Lydia and Alec, and I absolutely adored it because, oh, let me just say this. I love Lydia. I love her character. She's amazing. I am so excited to see her more in the show. And I really like her character. I know a lot of people didn't like her character, like to the point where I hate Lydia. Like, she is a Branwell. How dare you? But she's a Branwell. Like, how could you hate Lydia? But yeah, I understand that some people don't like her because of what happened later on in the episode. But then I'll get to that because I have not seen a logical reason for why people don't like that besides it interfering with Malik. So I will get to that in a minute because, yes. Anyway, so they're walking and Lydia and Alec are talking and she's like, oh yeah, about, how there's a rumor going around that you're trying to get married. And he's like, oh, great. And I like how fast that rumor traveled throughout the Shadowhunter world, probably because of Maris. But anyways, and so Lydia, okay, we all had our theories about Lydia. A lot of them were that she was, either gay or bi, or that she, loved somebody else. And so that ended up being the thing, was that she loved somebody else. But what I hadn't seen in a theory, was that maybe he or she or whatever died. And so she, was explaining to Alec that her parents tried to do the same thing to her. And so she went against them and went to go marry the love of her life. What was his name? His name was John Monteverde. I feel like that is a Spanish name and they kind of just verde'd it. Monteverde. I am such a bad Spanish speaker. But anyways, so she married him and then he died and we don't know how he died. We don't know why he died. And so then that was the thing that came to my mind. I'm like, people don't always stay dead in this story. Maybe he's not dead and maybe he'll come later on. But anyways, that's another theory for another day. So then they walk into the Jade Wolf and poor Luke has like a hurt arm. And so they all look like detectives, Luke and Lydia, when they're like kneeling down looking at the Forsaken. They're like, yeah, ruined up and da-da-da. I'm like, you guys look like detectives. That's funny. But Alec comes right after that. Oh, because Luke was like, I called Alec. And so Alec finally comes up to them and he says something to Lydia. He's like, oh yeah, that's kind of her thing about them just like taking over. And so I thought that was interesting because that's like not always something you say about something that's somebody that's a higher up than you. And so it was I took it as being like a little bit playful between the two of them. I don't know, I like that. I felt like that was a stepping stone into more of their bro-TP-ness. And I heard what I just said. Okay. Oh, and then, okay, so Lydia spills the circle beans. She spills the beans on the fact that Maris and Robert were once circle members. And so Alec doesn't know this. And so he's like, oh, what are you talking about? And so she's like, oh, did they conceal that from you? And yeah, so that is something that's going to haunt this poor child until he confronts his parents. And that's just another added stress that he does not need in his life. All right. So the next episode scene is the autopsy scene with Alec and Lydia, because there's two with Alec and Lydia and then with Magnus and Izzy. And so the first one was with Alec and Lydia. And so she's like, yeah, that I'm going to need to bring the High Warlock of New York in here, or the highest warlock or whatever. And so as soon as she said that, this was one of my favorite parts of the entire episode. As soon as she said that, Magnus just like perked up and was like, what? Magnus? Yeah, sure. What? And his voice got so squeaky during the entire time he was trying to talk. He's like, Magnus, he does magic. Magnus is very magical. I'm like, oh god, Alec, make it any more obvious. Oh my goodness. Okay. I'm sorry if you're like, okay, that was very loud, but I was so excited. I was so excited when they mentioned Henry. Oh my god. I do not know why people were not freaking out about this more on social media, because like, Henry, oh my goodness, because, what's her name? Lydia, which I thought was adorable. She was like kind of geeking out over Magnus. She's like, I'm actually really excited to meet him. And I'm like, oh, you're cute. And she's like, yeah, because, my ancestor Henry Branwell, him and Magnus were actually the ones who invented the portal. I freaked out. I freaked out because what these infernal devices references? Are they like, this is 3 now. This is 3 with Tessa, and then I forgot what the second one was, and then with Henry now. Like, are you kidding me? But yeah, that was just, I really love that scene. Lydia has a lot of Charlotte in her, and I'm loving that so much. Oh, okay, and then there was a scene that I did not see coming right after that, and it was a flashback. When Clary and Luke were talking, and then she was like, oh, Simon's dead, and then they were talking, and there's a flashback to when Luke, after he was attacked by those wolves, and Jocelyn is like trying to patch him up, and I really like that flashback. I did not see that coming, and that was a nice touch. I wonder if they're gonna have him. I wonder if they're gonna have any flashbacks. Oh, I don't think so, because they haven't cast anybody. But I was thinking if they were gonna have any with like Robert and Maris, but I don't think so. Okay, and so next we get the Malik scene. That was very nice. It was part of a sneak peek that we got last week, so I had already seen it like 3 times, but it was very nice to watch it again. Matt did a very good job in training, because he looked really good training. And oh my goodness, I love Magnus so much. He just continues to not be subtle at all. And so I mean, he's doing this when Alec is not around other people, because now he knows about Alec, and so he doesn't want to make him uncomfortable. But when they're alone, he's just like, oh, well, oh, don't put on a shirt on my account. I know, but I did like what I see. And I'm like, oh God, Magnus. And one thing that I did notice with the scene, after Magnus was finally able to pay attention to Alec's eyes, because, you know, eyes up here, man. But, he was telling him, or Alec, seems to just open up a lot easier to Magnus. And I find that very nice, because that's just really cool for Alec, because we all know, like, even in last week's episode when Izzy was like, you don't ever talk to me, and he's like, yes I do. And so when he was with Magnus, he just like opened up really quick. He's like, nothing is as it seemed, and you know, my life has changed, or everything that he said. And so I just thought that was really nice that he was able to just talk to him, because, you know, reasons. And then we get to another autopsy scene, but with Magnus and Izzy. And oh, this is another bro TP that I just absolutely adore. And so Magnus, did you see what he was wearing? I just thought it was the funniest thing. That was something that I would have imagined him wearing, like in the Infernal Devices, because it was like roughly right here, and it was like with a vest, and so I just thought it was a very Magnus outfit, and I just adored it. And so Izzy is our forensics pathologist, and that's just absolutely amazing that she's like super smart, and I love that so much. And so she's like, oh yeah, something about I just want to get my hands on it, like about the Forsaken. And Magnus is like, speaking of which, how's Alexander? And I'm like, oh goodness. And so then they're talking, and then they're listing stuff that like they're dealing with, and then Izzy's like, yeah, and then my parents trying to find Alec a wife, and Magnus's face just sunk. His smile went away when she said that, and it was so sad. It was so sad to see Magnus sad. I do not like it. And so his face was just so sad, and I felt so sad for Magnus, because like now he probably realizes, he's like, oh, this is probably why he hasn't been calling me back. Like, he knew he was busy, but he didn't know about that. And so I just felt really bad for Magnus, and I'm just very curious. My dog is choking over there. But I don't know where this is going to lead for him. And so as soon as like she said that, his smile just like, and then he looked back at her, and he like tried to smile like, oh, okay then. And so I'm just like, oh, Magnus. Okay, and then Izzy. She's the one that said, oh yeah, not all of us get to follow our hearts. And so when Magnus says that later on to Alec, I feel like that's where he got it from, because he tells Alec, he's like, oh, well, maybe you should just follow your own heart. And so, I think that's where he got it from, was from Izzy. And so I just, okay, so then, one of the last scenes of the episode, we're back at the cemetery, and this is where Simon is going to be, he's going to transition, from human to vampire, and he's going to come back out of his grave. And so it was just a very emotional scene. Like, this episode was the first episode I felt like that was the most emotional out of all of the ones so far. Like, this is the one we've already established these characters a little bit. We don't know everything about them, but yeah, I'm watching this scene in the cemetery, and it was one thing to read this scene in the book when they're all in there and Simon is about to come out of the ground. It's another thing to see it, and to not only visualize it, but to see it, and to see Clary crying, and to see Simon just limp and dead, and to see him in the grave, and then it was just very sad, and I'm just like, oh my goodness, water works. And then before all that came out, Camille decides to show up, and I'm like, oh my god, I hate you. You need to leave. Like, she's so, and so, Raphael stood up to her, and I'm like, yes, Raphael, take your leadership I don't even know. And so Camille, like, they all ganged up on her, and then Clary went to go smack her in the face. She didn't smack her, she straight up punched this girl in the face, and it was wonderful. And then she left with her little smirk. I'm like, yes, Clary, yes. So then Camille finally, like, gets out of there, and they have to deal with this again. So Clary starts digging the grave, and then she's talking to him, and then they put them in the grave, and she couldn't even put the first, like, shovel of dirt on him. Like, she couldn't even physically do it. So Jace, like, pushed her aside, and he did it for her, and I thought that was very nice. And so Raphael, like, almost went to her, but, like, didn't know what to do to comfort, so he just, like, stood there. Oh god, and then not only was the entire scene sad, but the music that they decided to play during that scene was so sad. It was like, I loved and I longed and I lost you. I'm like, oh my god, really? It was a perfect, what's it called, song, because it just made me want to cry. Simon finally erupts from the earth, and so he comes out. I thought it was really cool how they did it too, with, like, the shaking ground, and how he, like, reaches out, and it totally reminded me of that one season premiere of Supernatural where Dean comes out of the grave. It reminded me of that. Season 4? Season 3? I don't remember. Anyways, so he comes out all dirty, and he's, like, super hungry, and he hisses at Clary, and so Raphael throws in the blood bags, and he rips them apart, and the blood starts pouring all over him, like, into his mouth, all over him on the ground. And so he goes through the 3 or 4 blood bags, like, really fast, and then he, like, comes to his senses a little bit, and he's like, what is happening? Like, Clary, like, what is this? He's freaking out. And I'm like, oh, Alberto did such a good job, you guys. He deserves all of the awards, all of the things, just all of the things for Alberto, because he did such a good job. And he's so scared. He's, like, on the ground. He's freaking out. And he's like, am I a vampire? And she's like, yeah. And he's like, he's like, I'm a monster. Like, don't come near me. And I'm like, you're not a monster. You're still Simon. And then that's what Clary tells him. She's like, no, you're still my best friend. You're still this. You're still the same Simon. And I'm like, God, that's just even worse than him coming out of the grave for me. Like, geez. So Clary's trying to reassure him. And so he's still freaking out. And he's like, and he's like, why can't I say and I'm like, oh goodness, Raphael's gonna have to teach him, because it's just and yeah, more on Alberto's acting. Like, I really love it when actors don't try to stay pretty, you know what I mean? Like, they don't try and stay, like, he was slobbering everywhere, and he was, like, going around, he was dirty, and he, like, was not even trying to, like, cute cry. He was, like, ugly crying. And I love it when actors do that, because that's a dedicated actor. So I applaud Alberto. Many applauses. If I had more hands, I don't even know. Alberto did a really good job, and I was really happy with it. So he gets up, and he's like, leave me alone, don't touch me. And he, like, runs off with his new vampire super speed. And Raphael's like, you know what, I got it. Like, he reassuring them, like, I'll go and take care of him. And so I'm like, Raphael, my Saphael feels. I've never shipped them in the books. I didn't even know that was a thing until after I read them, and I, like, went on Tumblr. But I mean, I love that bro TP. And then we have a Clace hug, and that was a very nice. I'm a Clace shipper. I know a lot of people hate on them, but it's like, why must you hate? I love Clace. And so poor Clary starts crying, and Jace, like, gives her a big bear hug, and I'm just like, oh my goodness, my heart. Okay, and so we get to the part that everybody is freaking out over in this episode, and I'm just gonna start off by saying the Alex proposal. I'm just gonna start off by saying that I absolutely loved it. I was very shocked when it happened, but just because of the shock value. I really love what the writers are doing with this. I love the direction they're going with this, and we're just gonna talk about it. Let me explain. So before that happened, Alec walks into his parents, or he doesn't walk into, he like overhears Lydia being like, yeah, we're taking over, and Maris is like, you know, my children didn't do anything. If you're gonna punish anybody, punish us. And I'm like, see, she does love her children. But yeah, so Alec hears this, and so he walks in there, and he totally disses Lydia and gives the paper to his mom. And I just really love that interaction, because Maris looked at him like with such pride, and I'm just like, after everything he's done for you, and he's still sticking up for you, because I mean, that's his family. He loves his family, and he will do anything for his family. And so that becomes very obvious in a couple minutes. Okay, and so we get to the part that I was most excited to talk about in this review. So like I said, I absolutely love the direction that the direction that the writers are going with this whole Alec proposal thing, and the fact that it was his idea. This was something that I was not expecting, but the writers are giving me things that I didn't even know that I wanted, and they are so brilliant for that. So because this whole time, all of us were thinking, okay, they're going to force him to get married. They're going to marry him off to this girl. And so I was thinking that they already said that Lydia was going to be the one, but in the show, she was just the envoy. She wasn't, Maris didn't even know who she was exactly. Okay, so earlier on in the episode, Lydia was introduced in this episode, and I do not feel that this whole thing was rushed, because it was done in a very good way, with timing and all that. It was done very like nicely. I feel like from the point that she was introduced as this intimidating, abrasive character, like she said. And so even when Alec and her were talking, and she like opened up to him a little bit with the fact with John, and so and then Alec, you know, overhearing her conversation with his parents, he knows that she wants to run an institute because of the story that she told him, and he knows that she would like to be in charge, and that she is not, you know, in love with anybody else because he died. Alec is very smart. He knows what he's doing, and I understand. Okay, so let me just get through this. So he proposes to Lydia. He's like, you know, if we were to get married, we could both run the institute. We can bring honor back to our, I don't know if we said honor, but we can restore our family's names, the Lightwood and the Bramwell family. Like you said, that our families were, you know, good and connected. My dog is still choking over there. And a lot of people were mad about this because they were thinking of Alec only in terms of his sexuality, and he's so much more than that, and people need to understand this, because I mean, yes, Malik is amazing, and I cannot wait for that. And Alec, a big part of himself is, or will be, Magnus, and of course he will come to love him, and it's gonna happen. But people, or the ones who don't like this, you need to understand that Alec is still, not only is he still figuring out his feelings in regards to his sexuality, he's also still figuring out his feelings in regards to Magnus. They haven't even gone on a first date yet. They haven't even had their first kiss yet. They haven't really done anything yet. And besides, you know, this attraction between the two of them, there's nothing else really going on for Magnus and him to be like dedicated to one another yet. And it'll happen. It's just not yet. And I know, and I feel like I'm going all over the place with this, but people are saying, you know, that, you know, Malik needs to happen. And okay, also you need to understand that they have confirmed that Malik will be Endgame. They have confirmed this. It's gonna happen. Nothing is gonna get in the way of that. This is just, it's not an obstacle. It's just something that's needs to happen before Malik happens. And it's not going to get in the way of it at all. And the marriage is obviously not going to happen. And I'm just extremely curious and I'm excited to see how it happens, because it's going to be insane. And also, again, I feel like I'm just rambling and going all over the place, but Lydia, she's the other person in this equation, and she, you know, wants the institute as well. She thinks this is a good idea. And she never even said yes. Alec got down on one knee, and it wasn't romantic at all. This was a political alliance. This was a business partnership. They are not getting married because they love each other. Obviously, they met that day. And Alec is gay. So, like, as he gets down on one knee and he's like, Alec, bit my tongue again. He's like, Lydia Branwell, will you marry me, Alec Lightwood? And it's not done romantically. He does it kind of almost like, he does it kind of almost sarcastically, because he's like, you want to get married? We're gonna, you know, run everything if we do. And so Lydia, and that's another thing. She didn't even say yes. So it cut off when he said, will you marry me, Alec Lightwood? And we didn't even know. She might even say no. So we might be freaking out, or people might be freaking out for nothing, because we don't even know if she said yes or no yet. Okay, so now that I'm done talking about that, I know that caused a lot of discussion in everything. But so the last scene of the episode was that Forsaken, and then what's her name, Izzy, was being super sciencey and super awesome, and she's like, why do you have angel blood? And so then she figures out, she's like, oh no. And then that Forsaken comes, and then he starts fighting Hodge, and Hodge hadn't been in this episode yet, or he hasn't been in a couple episodes, and so he starts fighting with the Forsaken, and that was an awesome fight scene. And the whole time I'm like, Alec, 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 where are you? And then he comes and he shoots like 2 or 3 arrows into the Forsaken, and then the Forsaken hits him on side, and then Alec goes flying, and I was like, no, my child. And then Izzy comes and like freaks out, and she's like, oh my god, Alec, are you okay? And then that's the end of that, and then Hodge, you know, kills the Forsaken. So I think that was it for this episode. It was an amazing episode. It was the most emotional episode so far. Probably my favorite one so far. I mean, they're all my favorites. Like, I don't even know. But this episode was amazing. 10 out of 10 for me. Super excited to see what happens next week, and the following week, and the following week, and the finale. I don't know if I'm emotionally prepared for that, but we're just gonna watch and cry and then just die. So, okay, so yeah, please leave all your comments down below. I know you guys had feels. I know you did. So leave your feels and your just everything down below in the comments. And I will see you in my next video. Bye!